in any case, we are here with Zach Sokol. Zach is a magazine editor for a number of different esteemed publications, which we'll talk about a minute ago. But I got to know Zach when he was a editorial contributor at the Creators Project back in the Vice days, when Vice had all of those verticals that were all devoted to different passion points for young audiences. Zach, since then, you have gone on to be one of the better connected, more interestingly occupied editorial people in New York, to my point of view. And so it's been a long time coming that we have you on. But tell me briefly what you're up to now, just so I have a better sense of the current moment.
Well, it's great to see you, Ben. Yeah.
Nice to see you too.
That was my first full-time job. Actually, I was a student at the time too.
Oh, wow, really? Okay.
Yeah. I was the original Motherboard intern, and then Creators Project. And was the editor at the magazine and .com for like 4 or 5 years.
Right. Sure.
There. But yeah, since then, my current job is I'm deputy editor of Hypebeast print magazine. The new issue
Got it.
lands in New York sometime this week.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I'm stoked about it. We have 3 covers. George Kondo, which I wrote the cover story for. 17, the K-pop massive acts, which I had to do a crash course in K-pop research working on that one, because literally my first time listening to it.
You're not a K-pop guy.
Not a K-pop guy. It just was a blind spot for me.
Yeah, same. To call it a blind spot is being generous for me anyway. I'm just not familiar.
You know, funny though, it makes me think about, well, there's also a third cover, Comme des Garçons, with ASAP Nass modeling it. I'm stoked about it. And then on top of this, I also work on Sex Magazine, which is an annual print publication, kind of a labor of love, more DIY. And that also touches down New York this week and will be available at the Los Angeles apparel store.
I wanted to talk to you about that because the LA apparel store. So for those who are not familiar, LA Apparel, Los Angeles Apparel, the new company from Dov Charney, who was the infamous CEO founder of American Apparel, height of indie sleaze, early mid-aughts, let's call it body conscious sportswear, but also a real mercurial figure and a lightning rod in his own right. The Los Angeles apparel store, which opened on Broadway between Broome and Prince, maybe Broome and Spring, anyway, looks exactly like an LA, or it looks exactly like an American Apparel store from 2007, and I have walked in and bought T-shirts on a couple of occasions. And they make great stuff, but it is so funny because it is just like walking back into a time capsule. And so
trends are cyclical every 20 years. And it's like, you almost have to give to him in the sense of he changed nothing about American Apparel.
Nothing.
Full cancellation. And then people just seemingly forgot. And now he's hanging out the store, apparently, like dusting the floor, mopping up, apparently just about.
Look, I think, not for nothing, but I think, anybody who gets in and does the work and understands what their employees are dealing with on a minute-to-minute basis is doing the right thing as far as I'm concerned. I was at Back Market over the weekend, the French-owned electronics retail or resale store and marketplace, and I had been to the opening party on Thursday night, and then I went back on Saturday or Sunday with my wife, and the head of programming from their electronic marketplace was there working, cleaning cell phones. And the idea is it's just like, we need to know what the store associates, the experience the store associates have. So I appreciate that Dove does that. I also appreciate, and from what I read in Feed Me a couple of weeks ago, Dove was the person that suggested that you guys put Sex Mag in American Apparel. Is that right?
It was his idea. And I have to give this to Asher Penn, the founder of Sex Magazine. It's always been his baby. I've been lucky to be his consigliere co-editor at that time, contributing editor other times.
Yeah.
It was actually the push to make the magazine free, because kind of actually makes me think of Vice, being offered an American Apparel. The back page ad is an LAA ad. And being a free magazine, I think having that support and having a dedicated space to get copies was what pushed Asher to be like, let's try this and see how it goes. Plus, LAA is the biggest patron. They buy the back page ad, they support the magazine, they've given us resources in the past. It's really cool. And, I think for a small indie magazine that definitely, I think it could make more money. I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, why is it free? I think the idea is to get it to more people and then get more advertisers down the line.
Yeah.
And experiment and a good one worth testing. But we're already working on this issue and we're trying to increase the clip running off the momentum of this.
Okay, so it goes from annual to being biannual to being more frequent than that. Interesting. Sex Mag, it is important to note for those who don't see it, is not about sex per se. I'm interested. What?
No adult content. The idea was
No.
originally guy Fowler suggested the name Sex Sells Magazines.
Sure.
It became Sex Mag. And originally, when it started in like 2012, it was very net art era and it was online only. You could download the whole issue as a PDF. And then after the pandemic, I feel like the magazine publishing zeitgeist had changed and print became this rarefied object again. So it
Yeah.
came 2020 as a print only magazine and nothing is put online.
I talked about this with Kyle Fitzpatrick on Monday, but it is interesting, this feeling that print is finding new purchase with young audiences, mainly because it's novelty, right? Like there's less of a sense of it being particularly useful or particularly, I don't know what, like convenient or transferable, but it's just like it's new, it's different to kids who are in their 20s. They didn't have a lot of print. Everything was in the scroll of your phone. And as we've sort of reached the end of social media and that landscape becomes more and more cursed, it's interesting to see people go back and gravitate back to physical media.
There's
Is
also
that, yeah,
there's
go for it.
there's more brick and mortar stores than ever to find print magazines and just printed matter in general. And I kind of about this. Did a profile of Bill, who runs High Valley Books in Greenpoint, right near you,
Sure.
for Airmail a couple years ago. It was like the 25-year anniversary of this shop that was kind of hiding in plain sight. And for those who don't know, he's this book collector who has a private space. It's actually in his house, but he has 75,000 magazines that you can DM him on Instagram, go in person, and just explore on your own and pick out anything you want. He's got everything from like rare architecture books and plastic surgery tomes to old Vice magazines.
Yep.
And it's funny because it was the 25-year anniversary, but it seemed like he finally struck a chord with younger people. And he started an Instagram account where the whole feed is just him taking a photo of whoever's come by with their purchases using his iPad, because I don't believe he has a cell phone. And
Go ahead.
I think I followed him. He had like under 1,000 followers on Instagram. Now it's probably in 5 figures.
Yeah.
And around the same time, there was like 6 or 7 new magazine shops that had opened. And my original piece was longer. It got cut down to focus on Bill, but there was Left Bank Books, Climax Books. A couple months later, Library 180 opened in the WSA building.
Yep.
There's a few others I'm blanking on right now. Libros. I can't remember the name, but
what's the one on like Stanton Street that's half zine store and half like vintage clothing? Makes me what?
Fortune World?
No.
Fortune World's like the weed shop that also sells magazines.
It's not. No, it's
Late Books.
No, we're gonna figure this out. Hang on a second. The Google machine will tell us. But in any case, it is interesting. I love to see all of those things. Oh, it's called Bungee Space.
I don't even know that one. See, more to the point, there's more places to get print media than ever. That doesn't mean magazines are doing well per se, but I do think there's more accessibility and younger people
Yeah.
have interested. And I even noticed this at the Zine Fair this year. Seems like, broadly speaking, I feel like New York is back, whether it's from a print magazine perspective or a music scene perspective. The last couple of months, I've been like, wow, there seems to be an energy. Events are popping. I don't know. People seem excited about culture.
Well, I mean, number one, I'm really glad to hear that because, of course, as a New Yorker who can avail myself of those benefits, that's great for me. Two, because I think, we continue to travel in opposite directions in terms of income inequality and the affordability gaps and those sorts of things. And maybe some of the excitement has to do with Zoran and the idea that somehow somebody's going to flip a switch and it's all going to be, dollar slices of pizza again or something, which of course is never going to happen. But just, simply dreaming it allows you to be it. But thirdly, and probably most importantly, it's just that like that digital social vortex has gotten so torched that it's you kind of can't help but turn back and go, actually, the thing that makes you literally feel good as a person is being with other people and like, taking part in actual experience as opposed to this weird, simulacra of on a screen.
Yeah, I agree, but there's that double-edged sword of like, how do you hear about the events if you're not on Instagram? I find myself, I still get FOMO looking at what happened last night and what I missed, but if I don't know about the next thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess the thing that I counsel people of all ages, but my kids in particular to do is just leave the house, just get out and see what happens. Like run into things, say yes to stuff, walk into doors that you don't know necessarily what's behind, you know, just try to make yourself available to those things, and you'd be surprised at the number of stuff that happens. It's interesting, Zach, and I wonder if it's true in your, you know, strata. It feels to me like Rands and let's call it the patrons, right? To use the Los Angeles Apparel example from earlier, patrons are starting to feel like we have to do the stuff for the kids again because that's the only way we will be able to bring them into our worlds. And so there start to be more of these kind of, on the one hand, you can call them these brand activations, which are maybe a little suspect. But on the other hand, it's like that thing that a well-connected, well, or like energetic young person can find their way into a bunch that kept me alive at 26 years old when I didn't have any money.
Yeah. We need Medici's. I feel like that's even true for publishing. Like I noticed the other day with Our Hearts publication and how they're also one of the biggest funders, I believe, for LilyPad, or maybe it's SAP, one of those two magazines.
I don't think that's Whip Carhartt. I think that's Whip is an energy nicotine brand.
Interesting. When? I mean,
what's that?
It's funny. Where else can cigarette brands advertise besides print publications? And like you see that with Hestia. Shout out to David. He and I were actually talking about what.
Just for the record, I'm not shouting out tobacco brands, but
And I say this all the time. I'd work for Big Tobacco. 100%. I wrote about Hestia. For those who don't know, it's the first new cigarette brand in 20 years, and they advertise in Sex Magazine. They give influencers cigarettes at events because you can't advertise on social media. You can't use traditional publishers. So you have to find these kind of like indie DIY things to get the word out. And they've kind of mastered figuring out who are downtown players and providing them with smokes, which everyone wants at these events.
Right.
And I think,
I don't hate the players. I don't like the tobacco game, period. And that's a line in the sand I'm going to draw personally. But if you fuck with it, by all means, like.
What do you think about it? I know you sent me a heavy link, Chris Gay O'Malley's newsletter about lead.
Oh.
I don't know if you read, he had a previous one about this new Zyn type product that's meant for workouts.
God. All right. Well, yeah. All right. So, Chris Caramelli's newsletter Heavies dropped the story overnight, which was about how protein powders are testing very heavily for lead, and the obviously lead is really bad. People, just in case you thought a little bit of lead was okay, it's a little bit. No, lead is just really bad. Causes brain damage, causes brain death, just generally speaking, really not good. The supposition, or maybe the hypothesis in the piece, is that the lead is coming from peas because there's a lot of pea protein. Peas absorb a lot of minerals from the soil, and the pods in particular, which is where a lot of the protein is derived from, retain the heavy metals. Chris's previous piece about Zyn for workouts, I don't know if I really clocked that one, but I do think the Zyn for anything, we are very much in the Zyn for anything
and
kind of.
everything, whether it's,
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
I just noticed this week Starbucks debuted their cold foam protein products.
I've seen the wild posts, and it makes me hate everything about it all. But yeah,
You know,
got
I,
it.
I I hear you at the same time. I'm kind of excited. It's both there has to be a breaking point, but I'm very pro put protein in everything, put nicotine in everything. Maybe it's like I've been on a sober journey, Ben, and I just need something. So I'm nicotine maxing and protein maxing this time in my life.
Look, first and foremost, I'm with you. I'm midway through. I'm at the exact midway point of Sober October, my annual sober vegan uh, uh month in the second half of the year. And yeah, I'm totally with you. And congratulations, first and foremost, on maintaining that sober journey. It is not easy and not always fun. Um, but it is intriguing, right? You start to think about like where are the little hacks, and we're so trained now in the contemporary paradigm to think of little hacks that we have to try to find to do it. Like I got served an ad for this Kava Haven. So kava is apparently some plant that grows in the subtropics that has a natural calming effect when you drink it. It's not intoxicating, but it has a natural calming effect. And so they have this beverage that's, it's a mocktail or an alcohol substitute or whatever it's called, Kava Haven. I've had some of it. I like it. I don't know that I necessarily want to drink it forever in substitute for alcohol, but it's good.
I feel that about I'm not into kava. I'm not into kin euphorics. It's like drink alcohol or don't try and like
Right. Yeah.
just have your Diet Coke and be happy with that. I feel like it's simulacra is not enough. Like I don't even like NA beverages for the most part. Like Athletic Brewing is convincing tasting beer, but it doesn't have the same thing. What is the point of this?
I do this. I feel in a similar way about NA beer. When I do these sober periods, I don't drink NA beer because it's too close to home and sort of like,
Right?
what's the point? If for me personally, like I'm going to go back to alcohol at some point. So if that's the case, like why am I doing this? But the mocktails, so the Gias and the Saint Agrestuses and the Cavas and so on, I I will drink those because they're more like sodas to me than they are like, convincing alcohol. Simulacra is the
Yeah,
word.
and so talking more about NA beer that I'm not so into, but I do like NA cocktails, even though sometimes it's just very expensive juice. But I would love to read a guide to New York's most innovative and interesting NA cocktails. Like I've been to the restaurant Ada for the first time, and they had drinks that were one of one. I've never tried anything like it. No alcohol, truly bizarre. Or similarly, once I went to Commerce Inn, they have like a true robust NA cocktail menu, and they're beverages I've never heard of in my life. They're not
Well,
a well-known cocktail. They're their own thing.
all right. Well, you are the actual editor on the call right now, so you could conceivably commission that piece, or alternately, you could conceivably write it yourself. I've got my buddy Alva Ramirez, former Sick Talks guest, wrote a book about regular cocktails last year. So why not be the NA cocktails guy?
That's a
This is
great
what we're
idea.
doing. Sick Talks as job counseling workshop. Zach, this is what we're going for.
But yeah, so heavies, the lead thing was concerning. Protein is everywhere, and I'm sure we'll find more problems with like I love David bars, but products like that seem too good to be true. The fat, whatever it is, I forget the ingredient in there. They have a monopoly on this product that make synthetic fat paste or the fat come
Okay.
up. I think, there's no such thing as a free lunch. The same way drinking Diet Coke, like, can't be good for me long term. Fridge cigarette, as the kids call it. We're going to eventually find out the same thing about protein besides lead leaching.
Free cigarette is so funny. So, for those who aren't familiar, fridge cigarette, for those who are not the kids, fridge cigarette is the way to describe in a workplace environment going to the kitchen and getting a Diet Coke and having a cheeky moment to yourself in the same way as you would have done to go on like a smoke break.
Right.
Instead, it's just you're drinking your little 8-ounce can of cute Diet Coke and you're, lost in your own thoughts.
But, this made me think, you sent that link about coffee tariffs and how it's common. Like, we never question that coffee is a provided vice at offices.
Yeah.
I've heard friends who work in tech that at their offices, they actually provide Zyn to employees. And I wonder if that will get normalized down the line.
I mean, I guess I suppose it does. It's funny. I have trouble. I mean, partially because I have never enjoyed the nicotine sensation, and partially because I have such a strong association of nicotine to tobacco. We've already had that conversation. I have never had a Zyn. I don't have any particular interest in the Zyn. I find the whole thing interesting, but the way it has been described as this, or repackaged as a nootropic performance enhancer, I find really interesting. Like tobacco, the whole packaging of tobacco is around relaxation or taking a little break or, the having a little bit of me time or whatever it is. The idea of Zen as like, take this so you can grind harder is, I find, yeah. Oh, I mean, it's hard for me to square because it's so counterintuitive based on everything that I've ever heard about tobacco.
Yeah, I do think there are stimulant and focus effects. I don't know. I mean, that's been researched that nicotine can be a cognitive enhancer, but I also believe there's a huge placebo effect with all this. I think it might be even a pendulum swing back from people being over medicated with stimulants and that being like a very 2010s grind culture thing where tropics, Adderall, modafinil, that stuff was very common in startup culture, media culture. And I think, people who were in their 20s taking that now are in their 30s and 40s, whatever. You can't do that. You keep taking pharmaceuticals function your whole life. So people still need a stimulant, but not pills. So I see that being part of the reason, Zyn is so popular, even among people who never smoke cigarettes.
Yeah. Well, so it gets to it. So for those who are tuning in for the first time, SIC Talks is ostensibly a discussion about links that are in my newsletter, SIC on Substack, that my guest has sort of done a pre-read on and picked out as being interesting. Zach, you did me one better. You picked out a few that were in the newsletter, but then you also suggested a few of your own, including one that was in the New York Times this week. It was called "If an Energy Drink Ran on an Energy Drink, You'd Get a Celsius." I'm gonna cop to never having had a Celsius either, so I'm truly a virgin in this thing. Describe the Celsius experience, or just tell us why that jumped at you.
I think it's interesting because all of a sudden it's rare. This company's been around for 20 years, but all of a sudden the last 5, you can't go to a bodega without a Celsius sign or its own fridge. It truly feels like the most successful, not a rebrand, but just like finally cracked into the marketplace.
Sure.
And ubiquitous in culture, at least in New York. And statistically, it's true. It's the 3rd most popular energy drink behind Red Bull and Monster, and seemingly came out of nowhere. Maybe they hired a new marketing exec or something, but Celsius
I think they got it. I think they sorry to interrupt you. I think they sorted out a new distribution deal, and it is intriguing, right, to think how much, especially for people who come from, let's call it, a brand first kind of world. It is easy to think, oh, this is a triumph of branding or marketing or whatever it is, but so much of it is controlled by the distribution, like just simple the availability of availability. In other words, that allows these things to get shelf space and build prominence.
Celsius is it's a harsh toke for me. It's 200 milligrams of caffeine, whereas like a Red Bull is 80 milligrams, and a Red Bull makes me jittery as is. A Celsius,
Yeah.
I'm shaking. So yeah, I do feel like stimulants or legal non-addictive stimulants are more present than ever. I wonder if there will be eventually a backlash to this as well when people can't sleep and, are just shaking constantly. But rarely it's funny. Like we were talking about the coffee article before and how we're at this moment where coffee is both too cheap and too expensive. But I would always shell out money for coffee. I don't think I would shell out the same money for an energy drink, partially because it has the feeling of being cheap and disposable. That said, maybe a more boutique product. Like, have you ever had white label mate, like the yerba mate products? Popular
I have
amongst
had
rape.
I've had yes, I've had yerba mate. I don't know if I've had the particular one you're describing though. This is yellow can, green sort of
No,
duck.
it's like the Berlin product. It's not, God, what's it called?
I've not had the Berlin product.
Club Mate. Club Mate is
No, I've never had Club Mate.
super popular in Berlin. You can find it in like very particular bodegas in New York. Eventually, I'm blanking on his name, but the guy who ran Bossa Nova created his own version called White Label Mate, and it's sold at like nowadays. You can get this
Okay,
vending.
right.
They pour a shot of liquor in it, and you have like drink
So
cocktail
so
that
so for those who aren't familiar nowadays, the Bushwick based Ridgewood based nightclub in New York. Zach, that actually brings your mention of Berlin brings me to a question. Like, as you probably remember from our shared days back in Williamsburg, one of my fascinations as I have gotten older and further away from the coal face of iterative culture is just trying to keep tabs on it from a distance and understand like where things are happening and what's going on. You mentioned Berlin a minute ago. Between Perfection, the Vincenzo Latronico book that everybody seems to have read about the sort of like non-additive cycling of millennial culture with Berlin as an archetype. Um, it feels like the bloom is off the rose there, and that the most salient places in culture have moved on to someplace else. Where in the world, or even where, like within pockets of the world, like downtown New York, do you look and go, "Oh, this is where the most interesting stuff is happening"?
great question. Interesting. I feel like every city still has a pocket. I mean, they all seem
Let's
mosh.
hope so. Yeah.
I think New York, as I was saying before, like something feels a little bit different that reminds me of 2010s New York. Good example is this past weekend, I went to three different generator shows, DIY concerts that I feel last
Did
10. I used to work at 285 Kent, which was a famous venue
of course.
that eventually there was three venues in Williamsburg on South 4th and Kent that from 2010 to 2015, DIY culture in New York was super vibrant. You got to thank Todd P. and Rick Leishtung, these
Yep.
DIY promoters. There was a million unlicensed venues. I kind of think that, do you remember Ghost Ship in Oakland?
Yeah. Of
The
course.
fire? I think that led to huge ramifications throughout the country of unlicensed venues getting shut down. And for years, New York just didn't feel, maybe I was getting older, but at least like punk or DIY venues that had big name artists seemed to disappear, and they all went to license a million new venues open that were all legit. Now I'm noticing the last couple years that seems to have reversed course, and I'm going to DIY shows again.
Where
Like
okay, so let me just stop you for a second. I was riding my bike back on Friday night from a friend's 50th birthday party in the Lower East Side, rode over the Williamsburg Bridge at 1 a.m, and there was a generator show. No shit. What was that show?
so this goes back to what we were talking about. If you go out, you do find about culture. You don't just need Instagram to find stuff. I
Yeah.
went to, and also speaking of patrons of the arts, I went to 52 Walker, which is David Werner's Tribeca area, for a Raymond Pettibon show that had a wrestling ring. And
Yeah.
in the there was two hardcore bands that played, Dead Cities from LA and Haywire from Boston.
Oh, no
And yeah, Haywire played earlier this week in an alleyway.
They're right. Yeah, I saw that on the Instagram, and I was just like, "Who is this band? Where is this place? When was this? It looks amazing."
Boston hardcore, not dead apparently, and I'm from
No, I
Boston.
mean,
So at the show, the band is playing in the wrestling ring. There's Pettibon Wrestling Works all around it.
yeah.
And they say, stick around. We're playing the Williamsburg Bridge at 11. Generators, come one, come all. And my friend and I were just like, all right, we got to check this out. And they brought generators out to the walking strip, like right closer to the Brooklyn side. There's where the bike and walking paths diverge. They
Yeah.
set up there, and there's probably like 500 kids. And
It was
generate
amazing.
fireworks. They were doing that thing where you have hairspray and lighting it. So it was like,
Yep. I have a
pyrotech.
video of that. I was riding my bike back to Brooklyn on the other side, and so I stopped on the other side opposite the subway tracks and yeah, sat there for a while and recorded some songs and tried to figure out what was going on. And all of the other bikes were stopping. It was amazing. The other thing that was really interesting to me, and it was a sort of a full circle moment, was that um I remember walking over the Williamsburg Bridge to back to Brooklyn from the Lower East Side with my wife. I don't know if it was, probably not, we were even married then, in 2003 or 4, to see Yeah Yeah Yeah's Liars and Black Dice
Hell
play
yeah.
in a parking lot that is on South 6th Street, and we watched from that spot on the bridge down looking at the show. So it's like, for me, it was a totally full circle moment where it's like, okay, here 20 years later, same spot on the bridge, DIY music is happening again, which I just found it remarkable. But so
You
that
gotta
was
get
what
uh,
band was that? That
that
was
was the band Haywire from Boston. They're a
it
great
was
hard
Haywire.
Haywire
Okay.
and from LA. There was a third band, this kid who organized it, I'm blanking on their name right now. But then the next night, Saturday, uh, Joe Kerwin and his brother booked a show. This band from Philly, a shoegaze band called They Are Gutting a Body of Water. Terrible name, great band. They have a new record out.
they're they're gutting a body.
They are gutting a body. Fucking mouthful, right?
Philadelphia.
Yeah, so they just took over some roof in Bushwick, and that had probably 2 to 3 times as many people as the Williamsburg Bridge show. There's
Wow.
1,000 roof, free, all ages. There was drones flying around filming it, and I was like, wow, like New York is fucking back.
Dude, that's cool. I love that. That makes me optimistic for, I don't know what, like the kids, my kids, etc. Because I really hate the idea of having benefited from all of that cultural energy to get to a place where I have a really nice life and nobody else gets exposure to that anymore. Like, that sucks. And so I'm really glad to hear that.
It feels like a panacea for. I was so sick of readings. I feel like for many months, the main
Yeah,
work is just a reading. And, people are looking at their iPhones and something they whipped up on the ride over.
right.
Great way to socialize and meet people. I'm like, this can't be it. So art exhibitions, some generator shows feels like a swing back in the right direction.
Yeah, no, it's cool. That is cool. I'm glad to hear that. Okay, so but pockets of New York. Where else in the world? Like, as you from, let's put on a Hypebeast hat for a second and go for the next issue of the magazine. Let's look at, you know, I don't know what, Lagos, or let's look at, Lima, or whatever the case is. Like, where else are you focused?
Yeah, I feel like London's got a lot of cool art shows and pop-ups, even from an
Okay.
activation. And I think there's like young brands like Clint Cortez, who's
Of
kind of like
course. Yep.
doing his pop-ups become like spectacle festivals in and of themselves. I think that's cool. I think Tokyo always has a higher, I haven't been, but there seems to be a higher barrier to entry to find things than those who
Mm,
seek to get into the mix with stuff.
yeah.
And then Mexico, I play the bi-coastal person who goes to Mexico City, but every time I'm there, I'm like, this is beyond vibrant in terms of culture. Like, there's a really rave scene there. Um, I'm blanking on the name right now, but there's kind of like they have their own version of Unter, which was a New York techno party that
Okay.
happens like I would say once a month for several years, and the location would change every time. There's one in Mexico City that is very similar, but maybe bigger. I feel like you have to follow where trends in dance music are happening, and that kind of points you towards interesting places.
Yeah, fair enough. Not real up on the trends in dance music, which in a certain respect is nice for me, because then I, every now and again, something will drop into my lap and be like, "Where did this come from? This is awesome." Um, but by the same token, it means that I'm getting information maybe third, fourth, fifth hand.
Were you ever a raver, Ben?
I mean, I was not in the sense of like pacifiers and light up gloves and candy flipping and that sort of thing. I went to, when I growing up in Syracuse, when rave culture first started, this is very early 90s, I would go to parties, and it was fun. And then whenever I could go out in Philadelphia, I would. And then when I came to New York, I started DJing. And so I threw parties. Those were not big. They were not raves. Those were, post-punk DJ night, DFA, early DFA records kinds of thing. Funny, I was just listening to the new episode of How Long Gone. Has got Alexis from Hot Chip on it, and he's talking about a show at South by Southwest where Hot Chip played with MIA, Rat-a-Tat, and LCD Sound System, and how that was the show that they got signed to EMI off of. And I was like, I put that show on.
No way.
Which is kind of amazing. Yeah. Or at the very, to be credit where credit's due, Adam Shore put it on. Or Adam Shore booked the show, but I found the money from Adult Swim to put it together. They also played with the guys from Metalocalypse. I don't know if you remember that.
Love that.
The creators of Metalocalypse. Yeah. It was just bananas.
I would say Adult Swim was one of the cooler patrons of the arts for a long time. Like, do you prefer Adult Swim singles?
I mean, 100%. So a guy named Nick Weidenfeld, who is a friend, and now, what were you going to say?
Nick Weidenfeld, cool guy.
Very cool guy, and also he ran development at Adult Swim and helped Lazo and those guys put a lot of that stuff together, those singles, and his wife Amantha actually ran music for them. Great people, good friends, but he's one of those dudes who's also had his fingers in all of these interesting cultural pies for years. He's now the producer of the new Tim Robinson show, The Chair Company, which just came out the other night.
Yeah, I like The Chair Company.
I haven't watched it. So my son is a big my 19-year-old Campbell is a big Tim Robinson fan, and he's coming home for a little mini semester break today. So I have saved the first episode to watch it with him.
It's funny. I wonder, where do young kids like your son find new forms of entertainment and comedy? Like, I remember I gave you a copy of Sex Mag that had $1 Million Extreme on the cover, and I was like, "Where? I don't even hear about that."
Well, he and to be clear, that was you gave that to me because I asked you for it, because he asked me for it. It was he found $1 Million Extreme through YouTube, and I don't know like what weird little pocket of YouTube he got to. He's not, as far as I know, a Reddit guy, but that would have been one other sort of potential source. But yeah, I feel like it's if it's intentional discovery, it's via YouTube or Reddit, because I don't think the algo will let you go down rabbit holes enough on Instagram or TikTok to really find the substrate where interesting shit happens. I think that they're good for discovering stuff, but they're not good for discovering the stuff.
Totally. And I got to give it to Asher from Sex Mag. Like, I didn't know about $1 Million Extreme too much at the time, and those are some problematic kings, but another publication that would give them coverage, let alone a. And it's funny, I've been seeing GQ actually dedicate some space to comedians that you wouldn't imagine getting GQ coverage, whether Adam Friedland, Stavros Halkias. I've been wanting to pitch a story. I did send it around, but didn't get a home for it, about Matt McCusker. Matt McCusker. Do you know him?
No.
He's Shane Gillis's podcast partner, and they have the number one.
Gotcha.
And there's never been a single interview with him. He's been on every podcast under the sun, but there's never been mainstream press about the guy with the biggest Patreon in the game. He has a Netflix special that came out last week that's in the top 10 on Netflix. And I'm curious about who. I sometimes wonder if there could be a publication dedicated just to stand-up and comedians, and what that would look like.
Yeah, it is interesting. That feels like that comedy in particular feels like a place where you could devote editorial attention and find some backing and some critical mass, partially because of what we talked about earlier, where there is that move to IRL experience and sort of shared moments in physical space, which comedy does really well. Secondly, because they can be topical and address the absurdity of the current moment head on in a way that music can't as direct, or it's more difficult, I think, for music to address it directly, and film has to be prescient in order to be able to do that. Like, I think One Battle After Another does a really kind of remarkably good job of reflecting the insanity of the current moment. But I don't know that that was. I don't know how well you could plan that. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
it's fun. The perfect segue to that link I sent you, the Spike Art magazine interview between Peter Vack and Eugene Kotlayrenko. And they're talking about how most filmmakers are too afraid to make work that takes place in the present. And their distinct goal, Eugene, I don't know if you saw The Code, which was
I
Eugene's
did
film,
not.
stars Peter Vack and Dasha Nekrasova. It is a pandemic satire shot with like 70 different cameras about a couple that goes to Joshua Tree. And
Okay.
one of them is an artist, the other one's making a documentary about the pandemic. And he gets paranoid that she's trying to re-cancel him. So he sets up all these spy cameras to catch her doing some sort of a transgression or something that he could have dirt on her. And it
Yeah.
is, I think it's going to hold up as one of the better documentation time capsule moments of pandemic anxiety and culture, generally speaking.
So
And
okay. So here's. Oh, sorry. Finish that thought.
well, the one thing Eugene does very well is he incorporates technology into his films. There'll be a lot of like iPhone usage, split screen where someone's like looking at the camera and then we see what's on their phone on the other half of the screen. But it has all these like visual biases in it that make it of 2020, like the way the iOS looks. It's going to be different in 5 years, but it's a documentation of how Instagram functions or how text messages even look at a certain time period. And a lot of filmmakers don't want to do that. They want to be more generalized. I personally think a biased time capsule will hold up better in 10, 20, 50 years.
The thing that I was going to say was that it reminds me of, and I'm just trying to see if I can find it. So two questions. One is the code. Everything that I've ever heard mentioned about Peter Vack, and I don't know the guy. Have no exposure to him whatsoever. But everything I've ever heard about him is essentially like this is a very loud noise producing not very good stuff, but is sort of notable for that reason.
I
And
think it's
and
different. I'm a big
well,
fan.
okay. Well, that's what I wanted to ask. What it reminds me a little of like early John Waters or Lydia Lunch and some of the stuff from the early 80s, like early Richard Kern. Like these are cinematically not good pieces of output, but they are very culturally representative or notable as like spiky moments. Do you see the code? Is the code like a great film cinematically, or is it just like no, it's a very
I think it's
cute.
great. I don't think it's a one note thing. I don't think it's a punchline. I think it's like really robust and truly like moving. And visually unique. It doesn't look like anything else out there. I think it's a swing for the fences that works. And I think that's it. Eugene directed it. Peter's starring in it. I think Peter's movies too, and the ones he works on with his sister, Betsy Brown, are equally great and will hold up over time. I don't know if you saw Actors, but that's the movie where Peter and Betsy play themselves and Peter tries to transition for clout because he thinks he's not getting cast in enough movies. But if he transitions, it's kind of like a modern Tootsie in a
Well,
problematic sense.
so the other okay, so then two more for my viewing list and also like homework for my film student son. The other thing that it made me think of as you were talking was the idea of that the code and the many different vantage points, many different camera styles. There was a story in Off Ball, the newsletter this morning, about how USF, this is the University of South Florida, I believe, recorded its games on anything but a camera, and
Hmm.
it's how this as a means to create content for its socials or its marketing efforts or whatever. The University of South Florida football team recorded its game on things like a trail cam or a Switch console
Eh,
or an iPad a la Bill from High Valley or whatever it is. And this notion that the quality of film is less important than the juxtaposition of viewpoints or the sort of collagic storytelling, I think is really fascinating. And that's got to come from somewhere, right? Like so it needs sharp points like maybe the code to lever.
I also imagine like, people are sick of just seeing iPhone footage on an infinite scroll, an infinite feed. I
Sure.
like something stands out. Like this was shot with I saw video footage of the Techno Festival Sustain release shot on an iPod Nano. It was someone's DJ.
Okay.
The sound quality must have been recorded elsewhere, but like the footage was on an iPod Nano. I believe this guy, James Hill, had the actual camera. And it stood out to me so visually that I was like, I'm going to watch this whole thing. Whereas if it was just a normal boiler room, visually that's really boring at this point. It's homogenous. So I think any taking a swing with like a formal experiment like that rocks to me.
So okay, so that's let me actually pivot there because I want to ask your opinion on something else. So boiler room as a conceit or a paradigm, like we know everybody knows what that is. That the DJ, he's surrounded or she's surrounded by people. Um, they are all collectively like experiencing the DJ create a sonic universe, and then consequently are reacting and then interacting with one another around it. I heard a pitch, not a pitch, but a sort of an elevator pitch yesterday for boiler room for country music.
Wow, interesting.
And so which also makes me think of the like Uber for everything, Zin for everything thing that we were talking about earlier. To what extent do you as an editor think about, all right, how do I create the super format piece that I can repeat over and over again, a sort of a franchise creation or that come to life across multiple touch points?
I think about columns a lot and how would they translate in a 360 sense? Like what is something that
Okay.
print magazine column that then works as a video piece, that works as a podcast, and maybe even a longer short film? I do think about that. And that's like, I think Vice back in the day did that very well. Whether it was like Tattoo Age, shout out to Chris Grosso. But
Man.
I personally believe that like if something is a good idea, it could be a super format. And it's not just the cynical way to view that is just building IP. But I just think if it's a great column idea, it should be able to translate across media.
There was a comment over the weekend or maybe yesterday about how the New York Times Instagram seems to be minting stars.
I saw that.
Who's I can't remember where I saw that, but maybe in.
But I know like Wesley Morris is now an on-camera personality, and that's maybe a good idea, right? It's good for his career and good for the time. Or best example, podcast Joe and John.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
and it took a while for them, I think, to like. I think they were ahead of the curve and probably had to push the times on it. But podcast now is getting millions of views per episode. But first, it was like hundreds, and they stuck with it. And I think we're really on. And that works as a super format. It's a video podcast, an audio podcast. They have the short clips and cut downs on TikTok and Instagram. And now John, I've been seeing, does this kind of like reviews a track from his car. And that's part of the podcast. I think great. They're now on camera personalities on top of some of the foremost music thinkers in the game.
Well, the thing that I love about it, and by the way, shout out to John who just turned 50 on Monday or Tuesday. Welcome to the club, buddy. I DM'd him that, and he was just like, "No place I'd rather be." The what's that?
His birthday party's on Thursday.
Oh, is that right? Oh,
Nice.
see, this is why I know I'm not a cool kid because I didn't get the invite.
Oh,
I
come
just
with me.
have to. Okay, cool. Will do. But but the thing that I love about that is John, like John Bless is like prepossessing as a speaker. He's incisive as a thinker. He's very likable as a person, but he is not the sort of videogenic idol that you would have that a broadcast organization would have necessarily put in front of camera in years past. And what I love about all of these new approaches is that it goes, yeah, as long as somebody has a means to engage an audience, we're gonna give them a shot and see what happens. And lo and behold, you get some surprises. And I think that's what that was always our philosophy. Advice back in the day was like, Zach wants to be on camera, put the camera on him, see if it's any good. Like me personally, the camera doesn't like me, so I never, never ended up in that situation. But Thomas Morton, Ryan Duffy, all of those guys, it
I had
was
a
it was
Vack
it was easy to see.
I had a couple. Thank God they're off the internet because I had a terrible haircut at the time. But now they're not off YouTube. But kind of, I wish media publications gave young kids more opportunities like that because it can, as you said, like lead to not just a devoted audience, but like through IP and that can transcend formats. And it's funny too. Like, do you follow Channel 5 and Andrew Callahan?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
fit
yeah,
interviewed him for the new issue of Sex Magazine, and he's trying and sounds like he's creating his own independent version of Vice because now he's going to have his own broadcasters in various countries that they report from. So it's not
yeah,
always now. And I think that's great to give young people a shot to be on camera and see if it attracts its own audience. What
yeah.
publications at times are doing that right now?
Well, it also it illustrates the fact that you can that it is possible and in fact probably desirable outside of the auspices of some big organization like the Times. Um, you don't have to look any further than the Free Press to go. All right, there is a path to some kind of real sustainable media prosperity if you handle it the right way.
It
It's just sort of a question of if you want to try it.
Yeah, at that point, this makes me think of something Goots used to say when she was creating The Drunken Canal. I think publications, particularly culture and more scrappy DIY ones, work best when it feels like the staff is a cast of characters. And they're people that you can not just like read their work or see what they're talking about, but you come for them in particular. I think
Yeah,
Drunken Canal was great at that. Vice was great at that back in the day. I believe, especially like I'm sick of individual content creators, man on street interviews, people who are just the one person doing their thing. I'd rather see a publication with a group of like-minded people, each appearing on camera, hosting podcasts, and all kind of like unified under this bigger umbrella. I'm very pro publication over individual creators.
the does and it sounds that's an interesting way you're framing it because it sounds like it's less about the authentication that comes from inclusion in the group and more that there's a level of sort of forced entropy from multiple personalities that creates new value, a whole
Yeah,
that's greater than the sum of its parts, in other words.
yeah, exactly. And I think one person can't necessarily fill in every white spot, right? Like you can only be an expert about so many things, but if you all share a similar sensibility or voice, you can work together on a publication that shares that sensibility. So I don't know. I like multiple voices unified under one roof than having to follow a million different individual creator accounts.
Yeah, well, that I mean, suffice it to say, like decision fatigue is very real and gets to all of us, which is in fact to some extent why you see people just walking away and going, "I'm not gonna do this anymore." It's funny. What's your read, Zach, on as somebody who is conversant with the leading edge of creative technology? Let's say, does Sora and Face and Meta's vibes eventually become the nail in the coffin of social media because it leads us into a place where slop is so proliferate that it just like it all becomes noise and we just go forget about it. I'm it's just static now,
I don't know.
or is it a turbocharger in the way that uh, the filmmakers approach with the 70 multicams is?
That's a really interesting question. I think my optimistic hope is that it leads people more to these like precious rarefied objects like print magazines where that's not even a concern. I don't know. I do feel like the slopification is bigger than ever. I was recently watching Brad Trammell's report on ZERP slop, which
Yeah,
was like
yeah.
what led to this condition of now just the feed as this, you know, scorched earth waste. Do I think I don't think there's like a social media platform that will replace Instagram anytime soon. I mean, it's funny that now Spotify you can send messages on. Um,
Oh yeah, I haven't used that yet.
but
That's
like that, I think the image is just so powerful still that you need that as the fulcrum for a social media app. I
sure.
think text-based things are going to be tough as the primary usage for connection. I wonder if it's a great question. Will Zora lead to people leaving, say, Instagram, or do you? program even creating potential restrictions around that. That
Yeah, well, it's interesting, right? Like, there's I mean, speaking of Brad Trammell, his Zerpslot post from a couple of a week, let's call it a week ago or so. Let's say there are 10 clips that he uses in the carousel to explain it, and one of them is Hitler winning a UFC fight. One of them is Hitler and Beetlejuice having an argument on the Maury Povich show or something like that. And I saw that. Let's say I saw that on a Sunday, and then on Monday I had a conversation with somebody, and I was citing it and explaining it, and because it seemed to me like, okay, if we're going to immediately go from this, means of creation not existing to Hitler in all of our, contemporary memed moments, um, we must have cycled through a lot of stuff, and everybody must have seen that cycle happen. And I was describing it to people, and people were like, "What are you talking about?" Like, they hadn't seen it at all, and it's because they don't live in the Brad Trammell pocket of the universe. I don't know, just the whole thing seems so totally cursed and also so totally hidden from plain sight that it just can't be good. I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder, like, I'm a twin. My twin brother lives in a different internet than I do, right? Like, he lives in
That's
Boston.
intriguing.
He
That's
works
intriguing, okay.
I don't know if he's even come across, say, like, Zerpslaw. Maybe he has, but I wonder for him if it looks more real than to me, where I'm seeing it in the context of this internet researcher and satirist, where I see Brad Trammell, I'm like, this is satire. But these things also exist. So I don't know. I would love to do an experiment where I like get a brand new computer and social media accounts and see what the algorithm serves me from scratch. Um, I do wonder what people in, say, flyover states, what their internet looks like.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's worrying. I'm reading the new, Thomas Pynchon book right now,
Oh, hell yeah. How to,
Shadow Ticket, and I'm about a third of the way through, and what is starting to be introduced is the vast conspiracy, and which Pynchon always touches on in some way, shape, or form, but then also the ways in which the vast conspiracy feeds these incipient neo-fascist movements in America at the time. It's all set in the 1930s. Um, and it is not hard to see parallels between the current moment and all of that sort of like sloppy propaganda and, the murder of Charlie Kirk and the indoctrination of, YOLO, uh, the YOLO incels or whatever.
yeah, Pynchon's our paranoid king, and I think like got on sci before anyone else. I just read Bleeding Edge, his book,
Oh yeah.
the .com bubble,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Silicon Alley at that time. I mean, he's the best at capturing like this vague, you have no idea how high up this goes style conspiracy. It's interesting that he chose the 30s though for his potentially last work.
Well, I mean, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. It is pretty easy to see in the present day rise of authoritarianism and illiberality around the world, the precedents that were set prior to World War II. So
So isn't
yeah,
it funny? I'm curious. I was going to get it this week.
I mean, I have never found Pynchon laugh out loud funny ever. I think some people differ with me on that, but I have never found him that way at all. It is There are turns of phrase that are highly amusing, both in terms of their specificity and the vernacular involved with them, and then also, just the absurdity of the scenarios.
Okay.
It's just, but I will say this, I'm enjoying it, I'm moving through it, it is moving quickly, and, I feel like I'm actually reading it. Sometimes when I read Pynchon, particularly the longer works, I sort of drift off into corollary thought as I go, and I feel bad that I'm not really reading it. This one I feel like I'm really reading.
All right, cool. That's a good cosign. I just read too. I actually want to give a plug to. Did you read Rejection by Tony Talidomati?
Mm-mm, no.
The best book about cursed internet personalities, I think. It's the best book about the worst, biggest bunch of losers I've ever read. It's all story people kind of losing their fucking marbles on the internet. And I think
Okay.
that will be held up as something we read like, wow, we really all got fried by these dopamine driven feedback loops.
All right. Well, you said it's Rejection, and it's by Tony.
Mute. I think I'm pronouncing that right.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, I will put that in the show notes and let people find it. All right, well, Zach, our witching hour has arrived, but this has been such a pleasure, as usual, to catch up with you. And I learn stuff every time we get together, which I appreciate. And then beyond that, I appreciate your being in the mix and doing the Lord's work of keeping everybody else hip to game.
Ben, thank you for having me. Yeah, let's go to this party Thursday. I would love to see you in person, give you copies of the new magazines. Again, I'm going to plug the new issue of Hypebeast magazine is out now. It'll be in newsstands all throughout New York. Sex magazine touches down in New York sometime this week. It will be mostly at Los Angeles Apparel, but also probably, the usual spots, Mast, McNally, you name it.
Awesome. That sounds great. Well, congratulations on both new issues, and great to talk to you. Guys, Zach, where do people find you outside of those two publications?
My social media is at Zach Sokol on pretty much everything. I don't use Twitter anymore besides lurking, and I haven't been posting on Substack, but maybe I'll get into it. Maybe this is the kick in the ass I need.
I mean, God bless if we can be a catalyst for anything. All right. Well, everybody, thanks for tuning in. Sick Talks number 107 with Zach Sokol. And Zach, I'll see you tomorrow night. Everybody else, see you next week.
Bye, Ben.
Bye.